Fair fat your honest sonsy face, great chieftain o' the puddin' race. Abune them a', you take your place, panich, tripe, or thirn. Weel are you worthy o' a grace, as lang as my arm. That groaning trencher, there you fill, your hurdies are like a distant hill. You pinwad, you mend to a mill in time o' need. While through your pores the dews distil like amber bead. The knife, so rustic, labour dicht, and cut your ready slight, trenching your gushing and trails bright like one ditch. And what a glorious sight, warm, reekit, rich. Theep, horn for horn, they stretch and strive. They'll take the hinset on their drive, till the wheel swelled kiles they believe, they're bent like drums. The Algoodman maist like to drive, but it hums. It is there owes his French lagoo, or Olo wallow slew a sow, or wad like a spew with perfect scunner. Looks down with a sneering scornful view, oh, sick a dinner. Poor devil seen him o'er his trash, as feckless as a willard grash. His spindle shank get whip lash, his nerve knit. The bloody flood or field to dash, oh how until. But mark the rustic haggis fed, the trembling earth resounds 'tis dread. Clap in the neve o' the blade, we'll make it a whistle. Arms and leagues and arms and leads will sneed and tap like a tristle. Ye pows are what mankind you care, and dash them to their bill of fare. All Scotland wants nae skinking wear, and thou jumps to the luggies. But if you wish your grateful prayer, I'll gie her a haggis.
Well, here we go. That was that was a wonderful, Angus. That was the address to the haggis, which I'm sure you'll tell us later how you managed to procure your haggis. But that was wonderful to hear the language. I mean, there's nothing like it, and it's a perfect kickoff to our Burns night. Welcome. This is a lit passage, conversations in reading and living, a special Burns night edition. And we have Angus from Dundee, who's going to share some stories about Burns Night. And I think now we need to celebrate things more than ever. And I really thank you for your time, Angus, and welcome to Lit Passage. Everyone who is watching and listening, if you have not yet subscribed, please do so to our channel. We're a new channel, and it's sometimes hard to get into the YouTube algorithms because there's so many choices out there. So if you could subscribe, like, and share the video, we'd really appreciate it. We're a young channel, and we really, really appreciate all your support. So in celebration of the Scottish poet Robert Burns, who was born January 25th, 1759, and ultimately passed away much too young in 1796, Burns Night has been an over 200-year tradition in Scotland, and it's great that we could have you here, Angus, to give us the kind of inside tribute to what happens on Burns Night and why it's so important to Scottish culture, to poetry, to people who love Robert Burns. So thank you very much for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure, James.
Okay, Agnes Carnie. It's afternoon in Izmir, by the way. It's a rainy afternoon. It's probably a cold Dundee morning, I guess, in Scotland. So you'll need the Scottish whiskey when Burns Night actually comes around for you when you actually deal with the haggis that you address so wonderfully. Um, but Angus Carnie was born and educated in the world famous golfing town of Carnoustie. He attended the local high school in Carnoustie, and although it was a small school in a small town, some of his school companions have gone on to achieve incredible achievements in business, politics, and acting, including a member of parliament, a deputy first minister of Scotland, and a Hollywood movie star with dozens of film roles, including James Bond. Angus himself is no stranger to achievements, having built an award winning home completely from waste that has been featured on BBC television and dozens of newspaper and magazine articles. We have to have you back on just to talk about that. I know maybe BBC has already covered it, years ago, but that to me is fascinating because that sounds really interesting, Angus. Anyways, Angus, maybe even most importantly about the introduction to our guest is Angus is equally aware not to take anything for granted. As in 2017, with no warning, he discovered that he had a brain tumor, and it required over 12 hours of highly complicated surgery and months of recovery. So perhaps you know more than any of us the value of time, and so thank you again for being here.
Again, as we said, it's a pleasure to be here, James, and sharing with you some of my uh, previous experiences of Burns nights and things related to that. Because, like all Scots, we tend to be very proud of our traditions and our backgrounds, and we like to celebrate
Mm-hmm.
the occasions such as Burns Night. But
Yeah,
uh, we don't have many poets.
right. And it's not that usual for any country to have such a, I don't know. It's really a tradition it involves the feast, it involves gathering, but it's immortalizing a poet, and that's not that usual in countries to then have a 200-year tradition. So I guess before we talk specifically about Burns Night, what is it for you that either you think has made Burns so important to Scots who aren't PhDs in poetry or writers, but just everybody? What is it that for you that he captured or continues to capture? Giving voice. We heard the beautiful language, or giving voice to people and their struggles. What is it about Burns that you think has kind of built this, flowed into this stream of worthy celebration over 2 centuries?
Well, I think probably one of his greatest works, which is being now really moved into song, although it was
Mm,
originally poetry,
mm-hmm,
is Auld Lang Syne,
mm,
which is very traditional, and but is used all over the world,
mm-hmm.
and it's about. It's the coming together
Yeah.
of people and the and the linking of arms so we can move forward as a community,
Mm-hmm.
and the I think that's important. It's
Mm-hmm.
any wedding that you go to
Right.
in Scotland, there's always a lang syne, and even when you see right remembrance services that I was looking at one the other night that from a couple of years ago for the British Legion, and
Wow.
their special guest was Sir Rod Stewart,
Mm-hmm.
and who never performed at that before, and he sang Auld Lang Syne
Wow.
because
Wow.
he's obviously a very proud Scotsman, and I think that's what's important. It brings people together, and so which is probably in the current climate
Yeah.
even more important than ever.
Yes,
Uh,
it certainly
um,
is.
but but it's 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 a celebration, and it should these and it will continue,
Hmm.
because it's um, you know for for forever probably, because it's identified within the Scottish culture
Hmm.
of that being so important to
Hmm.
us
Hmm.
as a race, and a culture,
Hmm.
that and um, that these things should be celebrated, and will continually be so.
Yeah.
Because Scottish people are incredibly proud people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and proud of their background,
Hmm.
and that's
Yeah.
how it rolls. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's also so much of, besides the cultural aspects you talk about, it seems to me that it's a celebration of the language, the specific, language he uses, and the images he evokes. It's amazing because, like any great artist, he has a universal gift that he's offering everybody, but it's coming from this particular time and place that is continuing. I mean, I remember that my grandfather was Scottish, a huge man. He was like 6'4", and I remember hearing Burns's poetry before I knew what poetry was. And
Mm.
so often in I guess in my schools, you can tend to come through poetry when you encounter it in a class, but with my grandfather and Burns, you kind of just took it in before you even knew, and so it was very an interesting passing on. And he lived in Boston, but he had that it connected him to a history, and but also reminded him of things to do today, like you mentioned, enjoying the weddings. It's there, or even remembering people. Obviously now we're remembering Burns, but I was going to ask you about the Selkirk grace that is often said at the Robert Burns
Mhm.
night. And I don't know if you know it off the top of your head, but I have it written down, but I'm probably going to butcher the language. So
Okay.
should I read and you correct me, or do you know it?
No, I'll
Okay,
correct
good,
you as
good,
you go.
good. Yeah, because it's a beautiful, I guess, the Selkirk grace. So you have the address to the haggis, which you wonderfully did, and we'll talk about how you managed to capture or find this, elusive haggis. We can talk about that in a moment. But then you have the welcome, which I did by welcoming everyone here, and then you have grace, of course, before the feast. And I found that the Selkirk grace is a very old and traditional grace used, and so it goes as follows. And I mean, I am not an expert in this old language, so bear with me and please correct me. So it goes something like, "Some high meat and canna eat, and some wad eat that want it. But we high meat, and we can eat, and say, the Lord be thanked." How'd I do?
That's that wasn't not bad. That was not bad at all. So it's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's particularly relevant, in the current climate, because it's all about, that they're fortunate that they have food to eat,
Yes.
because
Yes.
there are people out there that don't,
Yes.
and that was true at that time, and it's true today,
Yeah.
and that's so. It was just Burns getting over that how fortunate
Yeah.
that they were to be able to have a celebration and have a feast and be together
Yeah.
to do that and it's you know it's because at that period of time Scotland was very poor.
Hmm.
The average person was worked on the land
Hmm.
and and there certainly wasn't a lot of money around.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I particularly appreciate about that is the Burns night isn't just a. There's a part where, of course, you're celebrating Burns, but what Burns' offering was these larger understandings about what it means to be human and to gather and I mean to suffer and so the grace points that way. It points outward to all of us, including the people
Yeah,
who may not have it, and to be thankful for it. It's not just a grace saying, thank you God for Burns, how great he was, and
no,
let's keep him.
no.
It's that's what I particularly liked about it. So I guess how did you come across Burns? Was it similar with me, even though I grew up in America, but do you start to hear about it in the air from your parents at a young age and then you study it later? What's Burns in your life as growing up in Scotland? Or is it something you study later, like Shakespeare, for example?
Well, the first time I really came across it was my grandfather was a farmer,
Mm.
um, and a number of my uncles were farmers, and they um, and again there wasn't huge amounts of money around,
Right.
and what the farmers used to do is they had barns,
Hmm.
and what they would do is they would hold Burns nights in
Oh.
their in their barns. So
Right.
and the locals would all come round and sit on straw bales, and they would all bring a bottle of whiskey
Wow.
and do dancing and they would. And that was the first time I really came across it.
Really? Wow. So your first
Uh,
your kind of first experience with Burns was like in this barn Burns night kind of
yes,
situation? Wow. So
yes,
you hear the celebration and the beauty of the language. And I know in Burns night people give they read his poems, but they also give speeches about why he's so important and it's such an amazing way to come into a famous poet like that, an influential poet like that when you're young and you just discover it like you would music, and
yes.
not in an academic field that's kind of cut off and you
Not
learn later.
no. Later, when I went to primary school, yeah, we would have more formal
Right.
Burns sessions, if you'd like, and
Yeah.
you would learn songs like "Green Grow the Rashes O" and things like that.
Yeah.
And then perform that to your parents. And the and but my earliest memories, and to be fair, probably my most enjoyable memories,
Hmm.
because are not the school
Right,
version.
right, right. Yeah,
It was
yeah.
more more the natural version, if that's
Yeah,
possible,
yeah.
of doing it with friends and family in these often in quite large because as you probably aware that along with the haggis you normally have potatoes
Hmm.
which are grown on the farm, so they were in particularly short supply,
Yeah.
along with mashed turnip, which again wasn't
Mhm.
particularly a
Right,
short supply.
right.
So it was a cheap meal to prepare.
Yeah, yeah,
Particularly if you'd managed to catch enough haggis.
yeah, yeah. And what's interesting about the barn aspect is, when you tend to look at, when you tend to think, not you per se, but maybe someone who from America, and you think of Burns Night, you tend to think of more of a gentleman's club, right? Like people in
Yeah, it
tuxedos,
wasn't like
and
that.
like, yeah, it wasn't like that, right? I think his friends started it, or his fellow writers or his friends started it. I think 5 years after he passed away. So, but then it had this kind of patina to it, like an Oxford Club or something, and that's not really how it's. That's not the only avenue, and it's not this exclusive, expensive dinner club. It's more,
No.
what you're talking about is. I don't think people realize as much that this was in for hundreds of years in barns and being a Scotland's not known as the farming capital of the world, so it's a difficult life. And they would gather together their whiskey and find the haggis and have it in cold barns in January and in pubs probably, right? Bar drinking establishments. So it's beautiful to hear that from someone who's got to experience those nights as a young boy.
Yes, it was a wonderful time in my childhood to be, because um, it was almost in reverse,
Hmm.
because you knew about Robert Burns uh, before you just liked, the Selkirk Grace
Hmm. Hmm.
and Al Lang Syne and all these other wonderful pieces, that before you even knew who Robert Burns actually was.
Right, right. Yeah, it's like because you hear it like songs, right? Almost like
Yeah,
Christmas carols that they're just in your
yes.
blood, and then you discover the man later. And I don't know him as well as I probably should, but I was pretty surprised that he died rather young. I mean, maybe for that age, not as young, but I mean less than he was like 30. Was it 37 or if I can do the
Mm.
math? That's too bad. But yes, I guess you could tell us now. Today you're preparing the haggis that you wonderfully addressed. So it must have been hard. You must have got up early, put on your hunting clothes, and went out looking for the haggis, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because they're difficult to catch,
Yeah, yeah.
because they've only got three legs,
Right, right. Yeah,
and, and they go around in circles.
yeah, and they're probably harder to find in urban areas like Dundee. Yeah, they're more like out. So where'd you go? Did you have to go down to the center of town and hope you could find one? How'd you find one?
Oh no, I do live out on the outskirts. Uh,
Okay, you're lucky.
uh,
Yeah.
and we do have very large garden,
Okay. Yeah.
and they're a bit like foxes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you could sneak up on them rather easily. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I say they do have this circular movement that
Well,
I've studied.
when
I've
I
studied for years.
when I've been in Scotland, I was at St Andrews once. The wonderful university put on a event, and I was there, and I got to experience. It wasn't on Burns Night, but I experienced the haggis coming in with the pipers.
The
But
Pipers, yeah.
what was even more amazing is people were from all over the world, and no one knew what a haggis was. And and so I don't. You probably have the same experience with friends,
Oh
especially
yeah.
friends coming from abroad. What are some things about that you hear about what we're joking that a haggis is kind of like a fox running around your garden, but what are some of the funny things you are heard from people abroad about what they think a haggis is?
Well, I say I was brought up in Carnoustie, which
Mm-hmm.
we used to get the British Open is held
Oh,
there
right, right.
roughly every 7 years or something like that, and we used to get a lot of American golfers,
Right.
particularly, and uh, um, being an enterprising young man, um, uh, we, uh, we used to speak to the American golfers, and the American golfers always wanted a haggis to take home. So, so we we used to say, "Oh, I will, I'll get you a haggis. I'll meet you, here tomorrow at the hotel." And they would say, "Oh, how much would it be, to get you to do that?" And we used to just invent a figure,
Right,
uh,
right.
uh, and we used to go back the next day and with a haggis, and they were very grateful and paid us, and normally gave us a tip as well.
Nice, nice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
you could do haggis tours, I would imagine, right? Like you could organize tours to go look for the elusive haggis,
so
like the Loch Ness monster, right?
yes, that sort of thing. But yes, but yeah, but if what I always say to people is that from abroad is taste it before
Yeah.
you find you find out what's in it, because
Yes.
if you do it the other way around, they probably wouldn't want to taste it.
Yeah, and even if you do taste it, the linguistic tyranny of the ingredients is going to affect
Yes.
you. I noticed that too. Again, the only time I had the haggis, it was quite an amazing experience. I mean, even though it wasn't Burns night, they did the address to the haggis, so he was present. And as you wonderfully captured, he's all about the gathering and the feasting, and even in the difficulty, taking this moment to share something that may be quote unquote simple, but something we should be very grateful for, and sharing it with each other. It's such an aspect of life that we just can't forget, and maybe needed now more than ever. But
Mm.
at this so when I was at the table, because the piper came in and the haggis was carried around the whole thing, and there was probably maybe 100 people, and there was this the advice was, don't ask what it is or what's in it first. Just taste it. And some people made the mistake of like checking on their phone and looking up haggis, and then none of them thought it was good because they had already been influenced by the language, what was described. And the people who just ate it were like, this is great, and then they found out afterwards, they were like, well, it tastes good to me.
Yeah, yeah, that was a good piece of advice.
Yeah. So with your as you were a boy growing up with these barn, would multiple families, like for your family on Burns night, would multiple families gather and there'd be one big haggis and they would share it, or would different
Yes.
families bring one? What was it like? I guess, what is it
No,
like?
no. It tended to be that it would be, families would take turns to do it over sitting,
Wow.
uh, and it was like, my grandfather's farm one year, and
Right.
it's the next farmer,
Wow.
and our family set up as the farm across the road belonged to my uncle,
Hmm.
so it was like, oh, I'll be over that farm,
Yeah.
and it was a good setup, because
Yeah.
the everybody could have fun, everybody could enjoy it,
Hmm.
and it was a filling meal, and and then the dancing could be enjoyed, and the different poems could be recited,
Hmm.
and it was all about coming together
Right.
as a community,
Right.
and that was, there was a very very enjoyable, you were celebrating your culture and history, and and as it, you know it was, Robert Burns himself was um, enjoyed the
Yeah.
things in life.
Yes.
Um, um, you know, he, um, he he enjoyed the company of women. He enjoyed drinking whiskey, and obviously. writing and reciting his poetry.
Yeah, it makes me think of I think what a great achievement is that he's a national poet without just being having a title bestowed on him. You know, he wasn't
Yeah,
declared that by a ruling class, and then the rest you have to deal with it. It really came up. It's similar to Pushkin in Russia, where most people, whether they're a taxi cab driver or a PhD or a government official, they can quote Pushkin and talk on and on about Pushkin. And Robert Bruce is similar. So it's this national poet that's kind of fluent, almost like a bloodstream. He streamed into the culture and has continued to inspire people of all walks to appreciate the particulars, but also, as you mentioned, the universals of enjoying every moment, and the sound of a language and observations that are important for us to take in deeply, because time goes fast and we don't know, as you know, we never know how much we have. So
no.
I guess with Burns Night, it should be a little different in Scotland this year with the the COVID situation, I guess, right? Maybe people who wouldn't get together now are going to get together because they may be living in a communal house. It's very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, yes, it's and I think I think this whole situation is that it's made you value
Mm-hmm.
having people around,
Mm-hmm.
and being more of a community,
Yeah.
and it's because I know you just touched on it, but yeah, you never know how much time you actually have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think,
Uh,
yeah, I think we've never been made more aware of people, maybe in a good and a bad way, but we just miss them so much all over the world. And I was going to ask you, since there's part of the Burns night where people share, usually there's a speaker about, I just keep thinking of that image. It's such a powerful testament to Burns that people in all these different settings are doing the same thing. Whether it's I don't know, the elitist gentleman club or the
yeah,
families in a farm, but they're all gathering to share memories of his work on their lives. It's quite an astonishing thing. So I was going to ask you about, is there a particular work or a particular memory of Burns that you carry close to you, that's meant a lot to you, that you want to share in this? It's called usually the immortal memory portion of the Haggis Burns Night celebration.
yeah. I mean, that's effectively about um, the the memories that you hold dear to your heart,
Mm.
and um, the um, the uh, and I think we all have them in our own
Mm-hmm.
lives, and
Mm-hmm.
as what I think a lot of Burns' work is, it's about not reflecting outwards; it's
Mm.
reflecting inwards as
Mm-hmm.
well,
Right.
and so so there are certain things that have happened in your life,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, with immortal memory, I always think of my parents,
Mm.
things that they did for me and helped me with, and which you probably didn't appreciate at the time,
Right.
but in later years when they're no longer with you,
Mm-hmm.
then you think. Mm,
Yes.
well, yeah, and the makes you appreciate perhaps all the small things that and the advice
Mm.
that they gave you along the way, because they didn't have the levels of education
Right.
that that we're all fortunate to have available to us,
Mm.
and or the same um, opportunity for reading and
Mm-hmm.
research that
Mm-hmm.
we had. Uh, my father never owned a computer. And he only died a few years ago, but he certainly didn't own a computer.
Yeah.
And you know, and when they were when my father was brought up on a farm, and yeah, the library was a van that came to visit them
Wow.
once a week,
Wow.
and so but it was very well received because that was they didn't have a television
Yeah. Wow.
because nobody had a television
Right.
in the 50s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So things so music and poetry
Mm-hmm.
was actually very important uh, to that, and they shared that with you, and that was part of every family gathering that we would would always have an element of Burns in it,
Wow.
uh, and um, I think that's like that in most Scottish
Mm-hmm.
family situations,
Mm-hmm.
certainly celebrations, because a lot of Burns's poetry is about celebration,
Mm-hmm.
and and um, and I think that's when it becomes important.
Yeah. I loved what you said because I mean, clearly Burns knew how to celebrate life and kind of make the most of the moments, the feasting and the gathering. But Burns Night also has this element where it kind of stops time. You know, you had mentioned when sometimes you don't appreciate wisdom that's coming your way,
Mm.
until later. And it seems like within this setting, which is very jubilant and memorializing and full of gathering, the whiskey, the haggis, the pipes, if you have them, the music. But it seems to me that's a perfect metaphor for Burns's poetry because you hear that celebration of language in his work and celebration of life in his work, but within that, there's also this wisdom that just stops you, and it seems like the Burns Night celebration is also an attempt to stop you and think about these deeper things that are important, whether it's parents or advice you have, or so it works on the both those levels, which I think are really reflective of Burns, because on one level, the Burns Night is a joyous occasion to memorialize togetherness and feasting, and like in the Selkirk Grace, the fact that we have, even if it's a little food to share. But on the other, it's that maybe for that night, you can stop and hear things you wouldn't have heard or paid attention to as much or appreciate as much in terms of the wisdom level, right?
Absolutely, that's all very much part of it. And I say, um, I grew up with not in my early part of my life. I didn't know who Robert Burns was
Right.
particularly, but I knew the words. I knew
Yes.
the I knew yeah, I knew that about when it was all lang syne, where everybody linked arms
Yeah.
but I knew every single word
Right.
of his poetry.
Yeah.
But and every single word meant uh, things to you, and you enjoyed sharing it with
Right.
the people that you were with,
Hmm.
and and you enjoyed, maybe the next year going to different farm and 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 so on, and
Yeah.
because it'd be some different people that you could share, and um, and it was part of being a community.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's
uh,
a that's amazing because I mean, as a later 20th century American, you often encounter poetry by yourself reading, which is a beautiful thing, or
mm,
going to poetry readings, and those are also beautiful things. But to have it to be surrounded by it like music, it's part and interwoven into festivals. It's so cool because that's not open
yeah,
to a lot of us
no,
when we
no,
first encounter poetry. I mean, many of us encounter poetry in the ninth grade English class, and you're like, oh my god, or here comes Shakespeare or whatever, and
mm,
it has this otherness to it. So what a joy it was for people growing up in Scotland or with Scottish parents who pass on this poetry before you even know the man. You know the words and his messages and the celebrations of life. And Burns Night is able to every year you can kind of dive into that again. It's a very amazing festival. It seems.
it is without doubt. It's and the fact that it happens every year,
Yeah.
it's and often throughout the year,
Right.
different because in some respects it means um, family,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With the
and I
with
think
the capital F, right? Big family.
with a capital F.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. And if you go to to big football matches, Scotland football matches,
Hmm.
that
Right.
they'll be because they see themselves as one big family,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
capital F.
Yeah.
But and um, I think that's important
Yeah.
because, and I think certainly in the current situation that we all need to work together.
Right. Yeah. This notion of poetry that's togetherness and awakening us to the fact that life is togetherness. It has to be shared, and the Scottish writers certainly get a lot of attention, right? The Scottish Enlightenment and Walter Scott, but there's no one like Burns, right? There's no one like
No,
Burns where he's just in the language, but also that's why he's celebrated on Burns Night in the farms, in the gentlemen's club, in the pubs, or at weddings you mentioned, funerals even. There's just it's just completely unique, completely unique.
completely. And he is immortal
Yes, yes,
because he's interwoven into the fabric
yes, yes.
of Scotland.
And what's such a genius for me is that it is such a celebration and identification of Scottish culture, like from my grandfather. But like the great poets, well, I'm not too far from Homer. Homer supposedly lived here in Izmir, or it could have been a she, or it could have been fictional. But Izmir's ancient Smyrna is one of the places that claims Homer. So of course it's a celebration of the particular cultures, but it's that message that comes through about celebrating life, making the most of simple things, sharing food, sharing music, stopping time so to come together and really, make the most of that moment and togetherness. That's what it seems to me Burns Night represents. And I wish I was in Dundee with you guys. You'll probably have a good celebration.
Oh, I'm sure we'll give it a good try.
Yeah. Now, is there a particular whiskey that is, there's obviously the haggis, but is it any Scotch whiskey, or are there certain ones that do you try to go to
Oh,
one
and
that's doesn't
now,
matter?
now, now, James, you're getting into difficult country.
Right,
What
right.
I
I know.
what I can tell you is that to celebrate Burns Night properly, it has to be a single malt whiskey,
Okay.
of which there are many.
Right.
But it has to be not a blended whiskey. A lot of
Right,
whiskies are blends of different grain,
right,
um, um,
right,
uh, and they tend to be cheaper.
right.
But no, on Burns Night, you have a single malt, normally 10 years old plus, and you have what we call in Scotland a dram,
Dram.
uh,
What's
a
that?
dram.
Is it a cup
Uh,
or is it a
uh,
weight? It's a weight measurement, right? Or a size
no,
measurement? No?
no, it's you have a whiskey glass, and
Mm-hmm.
you pour a quantity in,
Mm-hmm.
and what you say to the person, you'll have a wee dram,
We dram, yeah.
which
Somehow,
means have a
somehow,
drink.
somehow, I don't know how we it is when the end of the night is done. Yeah,
No,
right.
so so my experience is that some of them were not that small.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess so you have the memories as a younger child and then maybe in your 20s or 30s. So it's just it may be difficult this year to have it, but I still hope people, I'm sure you guys will. But I just keep thinking of the image of people, you know, eating the haggis, drinking the whiskey, telling stories about Burns and poetry and their own life. It's a beautiful celebration. So I really appreciate you taking some time to give us kind of an inside view on what it means to you and the Burns night in particular. Because as I mentioned earlier, we're craving these things, craving celebration and togetherness and feasting. So it's been really fun for me to hear about it, and especially connecting with my mom's side of the family. Their name is Hain, so I don't know
Eh,
what part of Scotland that would be, Highland, Lowland, but I never figured that out. But
No, no, it's not. It's not. I think particular to any
hmm
area. Sounds more like a lowland
hmm
name,
okay,
but
yeah.
that may not be the case.
So tonight, I guess the last question, since it is about the immortal memory of Robert Bruce's work in some sense, in a larger sense, but also in his particular poems, especially after the horrific challenge you faced a few years ago, going through the recovery from the
Hmm.
surgery, brain surgery. Is there work now that maybe you'll read that you didn't before, like a poem or a song, or on the other side of that experience, going back to the familiarity of Burns Night, do you kind of does a different part of his work speak to you differently, or a different poem maybe you wouldn't have noticed or thought about without going through this experience? That may be a good place to leave our conversation.
I I think what what you found the with the experience I went through is that every day is precious,
Mm.
and you have to uh, get fit in as much as you can.
Hmm.
And so I read all of Burns's poetry
Mm.
in a different way.
Wow, that's an amazing answer. So the answer is every word. Every word is different in a way.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
because the and it's that because that's how it does affect you,
Yeah.
and because all these these words that were written um, hundreds of years ago
Hmm.
are still as true today
Yeah.
as they were when they were written.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've still got issues with food,
Hmm.
uh, food banks, and
Hmm.
things of that nature. Well, Burns wrote about that
Hmm.
issue when he was did the Selkirk race.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, in
Um,
fact, yeah, there's not right now. There's not a shortage of suffering or scarcity or uncertainty. So I don't know if I'll be able to track down a haggis in Izmir. Probably not. So I may have to make my own. Maybe make a sandwich that looks like one or something. But to celebrate. But thank you so much for taking some time to talk about Burns Night, and I wish you a great celebration in your household
thank you.
in Dundee, where you'll all be sheltered in place, as they say. And but they can't keep Burns Night down. You know, the celebration will go on.
No,
Correct?
no, the celebration goes on.
Okay. Thank you, and stay safe. I hope to see you in
You too.
Dundee over some. Oh, my last question was, given the difficulties about moving around, was the haggis harder to find, or was the 10-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey harder to find for your celebration tonight?
Oh no, the whiskey become is essential.
Right. Was it harder to find than the
So yeah,
haggis?
no. It was easier to find. The
Okay.
super there's lots of it on the supermarket shelf.
Good. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, we're all in these lockdowns where shelves are a little more barren and we can't leave and stuff. So, anyways, have a great celebration. Thank you so much for your time, uh, and uh, and I hope you have a great, I guess, start to the new Burns year, right after the
Thank
Burns
you.
night. And to all of you who've joined us for the conversation, please remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please do share the video and like the video. It's a great way to support our channel. We're a new channel, and it's tough sometimes to get into the algorithms on YouTube, but sharing it or liking it is a great way to support us. And thank everyone for joining us, and maybe we'll all be united and pulling out some Burns or listening to it online. I'm sure there's some great readings by people, but I hope everyone has a good celebration of this incredible poet in a unique and fascinating particular cultural tradition. So thank you again, Angus, and stay safe.
Thank you.